for Tuesday, March 11th, but I guess we have a quorum, so we can get started. And we can start with a couple of announcements. My only serious one is that on Thursday this week, it's the deadline for submitting warrant articles for the annual town meeting in May. So if you've got a proposal and you want to get it onto the get it to town meeting for a vote, Thursday is the deadline for submission.
At noon.
At noon on Thursday, yes, thank you. And are there other announcements? Yes.
I'll just say really quickly, I'll do a more thorough discussion of this probably next week, but April 12th, mark your calendar, Rotary Pancake Breakfast,
Oh,
always
yes.
a big, huge hit. This year will be just as exciting as every year for the past 23 years, so
Count me in.
Right.
good.
Well, I have an announcement.
Yes.
The Selectmen's Diversity and Inclusion and Affirmative Action Committee has been working really, really hard on trying to get a revised bylaw ready for this upcoming town meeting. And we had a public hearing, we heard a lot of comments, and we have now, the drafting subcommittee actually spent hours here in the building on Saturday, redrafting it to try to put as many of those comments in as we could and the concepts we'd heard from different people. And so we have a new draft. So tomorrow night, the committee is meeting at 7:30. It's not a public hearing, it is a public meeting. And I have sent out that draft to all the town meeting members, and I sent it out to all of you and to the advisory committee as well. And if you have some comments, you should try to email me in advance of that meeting tomorrow night, because that will be, if we have time, we'll take some public comment, but it will be mainly the opportunity for the committee to discuss what is in the latest version and any final changes we make. So we are very hopeful that we will get something in Thursday by noon.
Well, I am tremendously impressed. I know you had a fairly short timetable, and there were some thoughts at one point that you might not make it for this annual town meeting, but I congratulate you and your committee and your colleagues, and I do hope that tomorrow night you're able to come together and agree and get that deadline, meet the deadline.
Thank you. Oh, I mean, we have at least one committee member who is still saying we're not ready, but I think most of us
But
feel like,
that's diversity.
yes, that's right. We have a diverse view on the
Right,
committee.
right.
But most of us, I think, I think we have worked tremendously hard. And I will say, I've heard from time to time people suggesting we ought to go through all the bylaws and revise them. Given how much work it took to do this one bylaw.
And how many
I would
lifetimes.
not, I
You
would not.
volunteering?
No, I am not. Our committee understands, and I will say this for everybody, that one of our charges was also to look at the related fair housing bylaw, and we have, just a preliminary look, it has a lot of problems, and we're going to be updating that next, but not for this town meeting. So we do refer
okay.
to
That's good.
fair housing in the revised bylaw. We don't specifically refer to our 5.5 bylaw, because that current one has a lot of problems right now.
We can do the
Good.
federal tax code next, right?
That's right, yes.
Or our zoning bylaw.
Yeah, right, you could also think about the zoning bylaw. Woo-wee, okay. Any other updates, announcements from members of the board? Nope, okay, then let's move to our miscellaneous calendar and the minutes from March, whatever it was, 4th?
I had one small change.
Yeah, and
which
I
I've given to Kate.
actually passed something in myself, which was
As
sort
did
of
I,
language.
and
As
as
did-
did Ken.
Then I move that we approve the minutes from March 4th as amended. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Benka?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay. We have a Lynch Golf Course Maintenance Building. Ms. Paradis?
Good evening, Lisa Paradis, Recreation Director.
I'm here to ask for approval to award and execute the contract for the Lynch Golf Course Maintenance Building site utility work. It is a rebid, and it is, we are looking to award that contract to Earthworks Industries of Plainville, Mass. in the amount of $97,915.
And this is compliant with your goals for the actual work?
Yes, yes, it is.
Fulfills your needs? Okay. Selectman Daley?
I just had a question because it seemed like a lot. Are you having to bring the utilities in from the street? Is that why it's
Yes.
so
Yeah.
high?
Yes, this is
Okay.
new utility work.
Okay.
And I think the largest piece of this cost is a lot of ledge work.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other questions for Ms.
Do we have any
Paradis?
experience with this contractor, with this vendor before? or-
I believe we do, yes.
Mr. Masick, do you know about Earthworks? Have you heard of them before? The contractor.
No, but
No.
the DPW
Have
did
experience?
a reference check, and they got very good references.
Oh, okay, great, thank you. All right, shall we vote? I move that we award and execute contract PW 14-10, Lynch Golf Course Maintenance Building and Site Utility Work in the amount of $97,915 to Earthwork Industries. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Benka?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next item is a very modest amendment for the Brookline Senior Center rehab. Mr. Messick?
When we negotiated the contract, before we started this contract, it was for $19,900. Unfortunately, we did the vote for just the design work and not the reimbursables for $19,100. So this is to correct an administrative error on our part.
Aha, okay.
And we do have the funding. The project is complete, and as I say, it was a little project with a huge impact at the senior center. So I'm really
Yes,
glad I was
Selectman
able
Daley?
to.
Hearing very good things. I'm hoping to see it tomorrow when I go to the Council on Aging meeting, but everybody seems very pleased.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ray.
do.
Okay, other questions, comments? Then I move that we approve and execute an amendment in the amount of $800 for work completed by John Catlin and Associates in connection with the Brookline Senior Center renovations. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Benka?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay, we have a grant. Ms. Hardwick, just in time. I'm so sorry. If you take a breath, we'll let you catch your breath.
I'm the one-arm paper hanger this week.
Okay, and in this case, it's not to receive, it's to request.
It's to request to put in an application, which I assume will be done by Friday, to the Massachusetts Historical Commission for the Massachusetts Preservation Project Fund. It's one of the few bricks and mortar grants that are around. We did use it for some of the work at the top of the Lars Anderson Hill when we did the walls so I've been working very closely with Aaron, and at the moment, actually, when I'm going to go back right down and we're going to look at the restoration and rehabilitation plans, that we did the initial conditions assessment report, and then Aaron's been working with the landscape architect for Fisher Hill Park and Ted Talukian, who's the sub-architect. And he went into a much more in-depth look at the building. And we've discovered that we really, to make it stable and to sort of get it ready for its grand appearance for the park and to make it secure, we need to do the roof, we need to do the parapets coming down and all the gutter and downspout work, as well as the whole north side where the chimney is coming apart. So we have to take down about a quarter of that and repoint and rebuild it. And we need to repoint, and what's happened is we only have so much money that we can spend for that. And as we were looking around, we decided to try to maximize our dollars and to take out the windows and the door, which don't need to be done for the security and the stabilization of the building. And because of the needing to choreograph the construction so carefully, that the restoration of all the brickwork and all the stonework need to be done soon, so then they can start putting down the promenade and the rest of the building. So, and you have to have a different bidding process, and it just didn't work to do that. So as we were looking at it, we decided to try to use the money. It's some of the money that Aaron has been using, and there's a private donation fund that has a certain amount of money that Aaron wants to use to match this. It's a monetary straight match. So we're asking from between $40,000 and $45,000 for matching. And if we don't get it, we might have to wait and start working on how many windows we can do. But as it's turning out, trying to coordinate what needs to be done to stabilize and really make it safe and ready to go from the Fisher Hill Park to open, the timing of the construction with the rehabilitation and with the park itself, that this seemed to be sort of the best option to maximize our money and to sort of work in all our schedules and all the what needs to be done for
Okay.
both that and both the grant.
Any questions for Ms. Hardwick? I think it's pretty clear what we're trying to do here is maximize resources and get the gatehouse rehab along with the rest of the park so that it all will be finished
Right,
around the same time.
and I think we've discovered that we can probably put in most of the windows in either internally or in a way that if the promenade already's done, that we don't have to. We can do it with a cherry picker rather than having to put scaffolding out. Ideally, we do it all at once, but we really needed to get the building safe.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
So it opened.
So this, all we're being asked is to
Approve an
authorize
application,
an
yeah.
application
Yes.
for a grant.
Right.
And the matching funds are available.
Right.
From the private
Right.
monies.
That
and
Aaron
also-
had, that is going, that
also
has been
from a-
raised for the Fisher Hill Park, and Aaron has designated that for this, if we get it, and if not, we can, do something, but this is what she's designated.
And also, will a portion, I know that, that a portion of the Fisher Hill Park monies were dedicated or were designed to be used for the gatehouse.
Yes, and part of what's happened, Dick, is that
I know that's going to go.
I think the
you
cost
said,
of that went
to-
up.
To the
It's-
stabilization of
right,
the
right.
building.
Yeah, yeah.
Is
And
any of that money going to be available for the windows, or is that all going to?
I hope so, but I don't, as it's looking now, no.
Okay.
So we came to this horrible realization in the last month or so that we're really stretched and it's going to be tight. And so we were looking around to be able to try to
Good, okay.
do that and then, work, and we'll see if this works. And again, timing is just a little syncopated and not quite as well, but we're going to just try to do the best we can. And it was a very discreet, again, because of the bidding process and everything, that, we can't bid it till after July.
Okay. So any other questions?
Nope.
Seeing none, I move that we approve and execute, okay, an application to the Massachusetts Historical Commission for a Massachusetts Preservation Projects Fund grant for up to $50,000 in matching funds as part of the Fisher Hill Gatehouse Rehabilitation Project. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Benka?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Thank you all very much.
Okay.
I appreciate your time. Thanks.
Off you go to your next meeting. Okay, then we've got several temporary wine and malt beverage, and unless somebody wants to hold one, I will read them off and we'll move them as a group. I move that we grant temporary wine and malt beverage licenses to Boston University, a license to Boston University in connection with events. There's no date on this. Hang
Yeah,
on,
we can get it.
it's in here. To be held on March 20th. Two events at Boston University on March 20th and on March 31st. Okay, on March 20th and March 31st. Also, I move that we grant a temporary wine and malt beverage license to the Driscoll PTO for Arts Equinox Committee for an event to take place on March 22nd. All in favor, please say aye. I think I have them all.
Yes, you do.
Okay. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Benka?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And we will move on to the main calendar. The first item is a reserve fund transfer for veteran services. Mr. McGroarty. It's nice to see you, and I'm glad to hear that you're doing good things.
Thank you very much.
I know it costs money.
It costs a little money, and it costs a little more money than I projected last year. Right now, we're running about $14,670 more than we did last year. A couple reasons for that. One is a kind of a shift in the demographics to some of more of our older veterans, and that raises some of the medical expenses. Because, you know, they're going to get prescription drugs a little more than some of the younger veterans would. We also have had a shift. We've had some of our older veterans that we had on Mass Health get shifted to Mass Health buy-in, which gives them instead of taking the Medicare, instead of charging them for the Medicare, they reimburse them for that, which is $104 extra in their Social Security check, but then they don't get the medical benefits of Mass Health. So it's great until you walk into CVS, and then you have to pay your own prescriptions.
Wow.
So, you know, we help them out with that. And we also try to shift as many of them as we can to the VA because of their income. A lot of them will have waived on any copayment, they get them for free. Or at least their prescription costs are $10 a prescription, so it's manageable. And then we'd reimburse them for those $10 as well as what they get for ordinary benefits. So that's a part of the problem that, you know, see an increase in is like a shift in the demographics and extra people coming on. It's been a hard winter for people. They're making decisions between heat, food, and medicine in some cases.
And I know we've all heard nightmare stories about the backlog at the VA. Is that affecting our veterans still?
Yes. You know, I've spent more time this year apologizing for the VA. People call me up and say, Bill, you filled out, you know, my mother's paperwork 4 months ago. We haven't heard anything. And I tell them to call me because I need to check on it because sometimes it just disappears.
Right.
And, you know, we'll advocate, especially for the health care. So we'll call 6 times and track down the paperwork because if you don't almost micromanage it, it can get lost in the system pretty easy.
And-
I'm not
and-
beating up the VA. I know they got a lot of things going
No,
on,
no.
but, you know, I have to take care of our people.
Sure. But I do recall that you're fairly successful in getting results.
We're fairly persistent, and eventually
Persistent.
that does.
And successful in the end. Okay.
Bill?
Questions?
Yeah. You indicate that and let me just say, you mentioned the $14,000 figure. That is for your
Direct benefits.
your excess of, or the increase of benefits from this year relative to last year that you've paid through February.
Through February.
And you indicate that for the month of March, and we're on March 11th now, you've already committed $10,000.
Just under $10,000.
Which is almost as much as your highest month last year.
Yes, sir.
And you're anticipating $10,000 to $12,000 a month through the end of the year.
Yes, sir.
Which would lead to, in your calculation, another $7,000. I'm just wondering whether, I mean, I asked for an explanation of what this $30,000 was for.
Yep.
And looking at these numbers, I'm wondering whether you've asked for enough, quite frankly. If you're $10,000 through 11 days of March, or do the requests come at the beginning of the month? And then,
I'm going to preface that, you know, I've already drawn all the ordinary benefits for the month. So what I'll be getting in for the rest of the month is you know, someone may walk in, I just had someone today, but, you know, most of what I will see will be medical benefits for the rest of the month.
okay, so they're front-end loaded.
They're front-end loaded, so I
Okay.
anticipate
All right.
about $2,000 to $3,000 more
Okay,
here, which will put me about 12,000 again, and then, you know, for the rest of the year,
Times,
2,000 to 3,000. It also depends if, you know, God forbid, 2 indigent veterans die, that's $4,000 for the burial costs I have that I didn't, you know,
right,
didn't
but we
forecast
can't
for.
anticipate that
Yeah.
now.
But in fairness, we would certainly accept your request for a reserve fund transfer should any future needs arise.
What I try to do is ask for the minimum and hope for the best and try to manage the money as closely as we can.
And I would
This-
even argue that's an optimistic, and I appreciate that approach.
This is giving us, basically, we need at least 25,000 for benefits. I'm going to be short about 1,000 for the ceremonies, and there's about a $4,000 oopsie budget in there, if I did it right. And, you know, I may be back here in 2 months going, sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
Selectman Daley?
Yeah, I'm wondering if, Bill, I really appreciate your persistence and your dedication on behalf of our Brookline veterans. But I feel like I mean, and I'm certainly not the first person to say this, there's something wrong with the VA. When you have to call 6 times for one person's benefits, and when your people are having trouble getting, you know, the minimum that they are owed under this system. And I would like to suggest that this board send a letter to our senators and our congressmen. You know, they need, at a minimum, they need a, you know, up-to-date computer system, so when they get a request from somebody, that it doesn't just get lost in some pile of paper, but that it's logged in.
I'm going to give you an example. We met a guy who works for the VA who's an amazing guy. He's a Vietnam veteran. He's missing one of his legs, or a portion of one of his legs. He lives in Springfield. He drives from Springfield to Worcester, takes a train from Worcester to South Station, and a bus from South Station to Jamaica Plain Hospital to work at intake to help veterans get into the system. And he's been absolutely wonderful. Every time I go down there, I buy him hot chocolate. And he went out on medical leave, and we're faxing things to him, and nothing's coming back. And then we finally call up, and the supervisor goes, "Oh, he's not there." There was no one checking that fax machine.
And nobody told you.
Nobody told us. And there's nothing on the, you know, it was just, he got sick suddenly, so he didn't put anything on his machine, and they just closed his office, and stuff's still going in there. The fax machine, as far as I could figure, is probably overloaded, and things are getting lost.
It's just piled
and-
up on the floor.
What?
Or out of-
Or they're out of, it's
Yeah,
out of
out of
memory.
paper, right.
So, you know, what we did is we got a hold of the supervisor, we've been sending it to their supervisor now, but there's a delay because I didn't know that. I didn't know that till I
Well,
called looking for things.
I would like to ask that you work with Mr. Kleckner in coming up with a letter that we
Actually,
can send.
use that example.
Yeah.
I'd be very happy
To
to.
people, because, you know, just to, I'm sure they're hearing it from other people, but I'd like them to hear it from us, that we find this unacceptable.
Right,
And-
okay.
And not every town has you know, who are willing to be so persistent and dedicated. You know, I feel less sorry for our veterans than I do for some other citizen
Yeah,
towns.
I'm really fortunate to have a great partner in Anne Marie too, who helps immensely. And I've got a huge amount of support from the veterans organizations, which help immensely too here in town. So I'm in
Well,
between that and
perhaps
the
they'd
resources of town.
like to join us in sending a letter about
I'd
the
love to do that, and
Yeah.
I want to make sure my name and telephone number on it, because if they'd like to talk to me, I'd love to talk to them.
Then I would say, we don't need to take a vote on this, I think, but certainly, I think Mr. Kleckner is writing notes here to confer with Mr. McGroarty and come up with a letter that we certainly would be very happy to sign with you on behalf of our veterans.
Absolutely.
Selectman Bingham.
Yeah, actually, a question and then a question that I think I know the answer to. The Memorial Day cost for fiscal year 13 was paid out of the Flag Day Fund.
A big chunk of it was.
And that was a fund from the sale of ads for the Flag Day book, basically, is that, or what was?
I
or
think
what
there
is-
was a residual amount of money, and I
Right.
think we had some money that you had transferred over
Yeah.
that, you know, Sean said, you know, to use for that. So we
And
did that
is-
year.
That's not in existence now because we're not selling the Flag Day ad.
We're not raising any money for that. We're still doing the Adopt-a-Poll program, but
Okay,
we're not doing the ad book anymore.
so you can, if you want a flag from a pole in town with the name of
Call us
a
up,
veteran hanging from that, you can do it.
call us
still.
up and write us a check.
Okay. As to the benefits, the amount that you're over, that ultimately gets reimbursed in part by the federal government.
No, it gets reimbursed by the state government.
State government,
This is
okay.
our reimbursement rate. For the direct benefits to the veterans, it's 75%.
Okay,
So, you know, if we spend $28,000 of this on veterans, you know, we'll get 21,000 back, roughly 21,000 back.
But we're dealing with a cash flow issue
Yeah,
here, right?
cash
now.
flow issue. Now, I
Gotcha.
gotta preface that, the flags we purchase, we get 50% back on.
Okay, good.
And the funerals are 50% too, but we still get something back. It doesn't come to my office, it goes straight to the cherry sheet,
Sure.
Okay,
general fund.
Good.
Any other questions or comments? Then I move that we approve and transmit to the advisory committee the request of the Veteran Services Director, Mr. McGroarty, for a reserve fund transfer in the amount of $30,000. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Benka?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And footnote, we do hope that you will be able to show us a draft letter fairly soon.
Thank you, I will, I'll make sure I'll do that, because
We know you will.
something's gonna break. I can tell you that this, though, for the claims, they're starting to farm them to other states, which is moving things along now. I'm getting
Aha.
people from Maine and, you know, Ohio and other places calling me up for my claims, which I never even have Boston call me up and ask questions. So the
Wow.
fact they're asking questions is a good thing.
Okay,
So we've seen some progress.
excellent.
But in this day and age, who doesn't have like an automated system to process? I mean, it seems ridiculous
Don't
to me.
ask.
They came up with this system
Veterans,
called,
the IRS.
I
called
don't
the,
know many people who even have
they
fax
came up with
machines
this system
anymore.
called the expedited claim, where you have your
Yeah.
doctor fill out the form. And they never coordinated with their own doctors, so any veteran that has a VA doctor, we sent multiple to them, we tried to use this to get people through faster. The VA doctors won't fill out the form to the VA to expedite the claim. Absolutely not, especially the psychiatry department, which some of these people need the money more than others, and they wouldn't fill out, you have a better chance with a civilian doctor than you do the VA doctor filling out the VA form for a VA patient to expedite his claim for service-connected disability. So far, no VA doctor, and I'm not the only person that's had this problem, I've talked to other VSOs, has filled it out, and
You say none? Not any?
none. I sent one young gentleman down, and he went to the head of psychiatry, and she said, we're not gonna do that. And this is a VA program that they're pushing. They had us go to,
They-
they had Anne Marie and I go to Manchester, New Hampshire, take a class on it. So, I mean, I've seen it as a dud. I mean, I've seen no progress with the expedited claim. The state was pushing it very hard, but, and also they want me to, they want us to do all the background work, which is fine if you have a young man or your woman that just got out of the service that has their medical records, because now they have photocopies. Try doing that with a World War II veteran that wants to file a hearing loss claim. We're lucky if we can get his discharge. So it's been a frustrating thing, and, you know, they're trying to fix it, but they're not being combat effective.
For sure. And, oh, never mind. Don't get me started.
Okay, I'll let you go. Thank you so much, Mr. Kleckner. I'll be in your office tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next item we have is a police department authorization for filling a position. Chief?
Good evening. As you know, back in October or November, you approved the hiring of 8 additional police officers. We had 8 vacancies at the time. In December, we had another resignation. And just this past couple of weeks, we've gotten along pretty well in our hiring process for those 8. A week and a half ago, we finished up the oral interview, so we've done backgrounds and oral interview. And we took several of the candidates in for those steps. Upon the recommendation of our oral panel, which were made up of Sandra DeBow from our HR department, Superintendent Mark Morgan, and Detective Lieutenant Stephen Burke, they came out with 9 where they felt high-quality candidates for position of police officer in our department. And they recommended that I come back in front of the board and ask the board to try to fill that last vacancy that's pending, because they feel that the 9 candidates will really represent our department very well. So I'm asking just to expand from 8 to 9. And if you agree to that, I can come back next week with the 9 names.
Okay.
I
Questions?
thought you were saying you'd come back next week with yet another request.
You might do that,
Well,
too.
it would be a conditional officer employment for 9.
But we do, good news is we have 9 candidates right now
Yes.
available. Right. Okay. Are there questions for the chief with regard to this? No. Then I move that we approve and transmit, I move that we authorize filling a vacancy in the position of police officer. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Benka?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
So we'll look forward to seeing you with your 9 candidates.
Yes, thank you.
Next item is an interview for boards and commissions. Ms. Greenberg.
Hello.
Good evening.
So, we have a vacancy, I believe, but tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us why you're interested, and, what your interest in the commission is.
Okay, great. So my full-time job right now is at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. I love the arts. I also volunteer at the Institute of Contemporary Art on the weekends, and I also teach art history for Suffolk University and Lesley University. And my interest specifically in the commission is, so obviously the arts part, I love the arts. I love getting people engaged in the arts. And then for Brookline specifically, I love Brookline. I grew up here. And I am still involved. I'm currently teaching a course for Brookline Adult and Community Education. Yeah.
Questions?
I do have a question. So your address that you wrote down on the sheet says you live in Boston?
Yes.
Okay, and are we able to appoint
I
people
think
who
we
don't
may
live-
have to investigate this because
Oh,
I
thought
recall.
they checked it already.
Did they check the bylaws? Because I
Yeah.
remember this question has come up in the past.
Yeah, and Joe wrote me that it was fine, but yeah.
Aha, all right. I don't want to mislead you or in anything, but we need to hear officially, directly, and we'll have to ask that question. We would not, it wouldn't matter, except that if it's not permitted, we can't do it.
Right,
I guess
right.
is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
However, go
Well,
ahead.
I'll ask a more substantive question then. So do you, you've got a lot of different arts area experience, but do you have any specific programs or thoughts that, I'd love to work on this if I got on the Arts Commission?
Yeah, so my passion is contemporary art, and that's what I teach, that's what I'm interested in. Specifically, I am personally interested in figuring out how to engage more people in the arts, whether it's more accessible exhibitions, things like that, or even in terms of helping with grants and funding, things like that. That would be my interest, but like I said, I'm very passionate about the arts in general, and I'm happy to help out in any way that they need me to.
Great. Other questions? Selectman Benka?
Yeah, given your interest and expertise in contemporary art, I have to ask, what do you do at the Gardner Museum?
Excellent question. So I actually, I have many hats at the Gardner. I manage the databases and the research, so more technical stuff. But I do give tours on my lunch break, and we do have a contemporary art program, which a lot of people are not
Really?
actually aware about. Yeah, it's about 20 years old, but it's on and off. So I
And
think-
also, the changing exhibits can include contemporary art, right?
Exactly. Yep. So there's one up right now, and there's going to be a new one opening in mid-April
Okay,
too.
I was not aware of that.
You
A
should
lot
go
of
visit
people
the
are
new.
not, yeah.
I stopped visiting when the Vermeer disappeared.
Oh,
It'll come back. It's only been 22 years.
well, I will have to say, the new facilities are really lovely and complement the mansion that was there all before, so,
I'm glad you like
good
it.
visit, worth a good visit. All right, any other questions for
question.
our candidate?
Actually, I got a question and just another thing, too. One of the things that makes arts tick in Brookline is money. You have experience fundraising, or any thoughts on fundraising?
Yes,
I think
I work in the
another
fundraising department at the Gardner. So, yeah, lots of expertise in that.
Good. Another thing, I say this to you just by way of announcement to everybody. The Brookline Arts Center is looking for a new director right now. I don't know if you know
Oh.
that, but you might think about that as as a career option for yourself, too. I know.
I will definitely think about that.
Current director just announced his resignation last week, so
dear.
they're actively pursuing.
Okay. All right, well, you got it first from the Board of Selectmen. How about that?
We don't hire.
We don't do that very often.
Hire.
We don't hire, no, not at all. Just spreading the word. Okay, well, any other questions or comments? Thank you very much for your interest. We probably won't be making appointments right away, but we will definitely confirm whether you're eligible to be appointed or not, okay?
Great,
And-
thank you.
And you would certainly be a great addition if you are eligible, I think we can honestly say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we now have financial plan and the finance department, which I observe all in a row. Mr. Cirillo.
Yeah, this is a lineup, so. Yes, I am here to present the Finance Department's plan for fiscal 15. With me tonight is David Giandakakis, Gary McCabe, and Michael DePietro. They'll be available to answer any questions you have after I make a brief summary of the department for fiscal 15. We have a request in for $2,845,000, which is actually a reduction of 1.3%, reduction of approximately $38,000. The four divisions have different directions on these changes in the budget. Assessing is increasing by about 0.5%, approximately 0.5%. And that is because they have some additional costs for software maintenance, annual software maintenance. The Controller's Office is increasing by 6.7%, and again, that has something to do with software. That is a piece of software, a module within Munis for catastrophe recovery. The Purchasing Office is being reduced by 0.5%, and that's just simply a swap of capital. Last year, there was some capital in their budget. This year, fiscal 15, there's some capital in the budget, but this year's capital is less than last year's capital, so that reduces it. And finally, the Treasurer's Division, that's reduced by approximately 7%, and that represents the effects of the implementation of the payroll, Munis payroll. The full-time equivalents are essentially the same. I believe that there was one part-time employee in the payroll subdivision who went from 13 hours a week to 14 hours a week, I think. That is the total change in the operating budget. Just a quick summary of our activities. I'll say the four divisions have many things that they do from year to year, but the real focus of our attention this year have been on computer changes. Again, I've referenced the assessing department. They're implementing an upgrade to their CAMA Value Pro system, which is the system that develops the values for our tax base. The Controller, Purchasing, and Treasurer's Division have been, of course, working on the payroll conversion, which has taken approximately 14 months to do. And the Controller, again, will be, if this budget is passed, implementing a catastrophe recovery module for Munis, which essentially means that if all of the systems in the town fail, we could access the data that's been accumulated off-site, actually out of state, in a Munis central location in the state of Maine. And so that is the brief summary of the Finance Department, and if any of us can answer any of your questions, I'd be glad to.
Well, that was pretty brief. So, Selectman Daley.
Yeah, I have some questions. So I want to hear how the transfer to the Munis payroll thing went. And did I see the assessor's office was also transferring to a different assessment thing? And
Well, as I said, the assessing division is going to an upgrade from, it's basically a higher level of the software that they now have. But it's the same company, but it's a higher level. The payroll conversion was a complicated one, and I have to commend a number of people, not only in the Finance Department, but in the Human Resources Department, particularly in the IT department, and various departments, school department and town departments all chipped in. I mean, there were people who were working weekend after weekend for months. The conversion probably cost more than we anticipated, particularly in the area of overtime. Usually conversions do. The conversion has been completed. The first payroll run was on January 2nd. We've now run 11 payrolls. We're shaking out the system, but it seems to be working. It seems there is improvement on our system, although when I say we're shaking out the system, the new system runs differently from the old system. It sets policy differently than the old system that was outsourced to Harper's. And so across the board, internally in the finance departments and in the line departments, people are learning how to do a different process. With that said, I think it's been a success. I'll say that it's reflected in this operating budget. We're saving money, and that will be annual and ongoing. I'm pleased with the results.
Are there questions?
Thank you. Where do those savings appear? You said it's reflected in the operating budget.
$73,000 reduction in the treasury operation.
Okay, so that's
where it
directly
comes from
attributable.
is that we had a contract service for Harper's, which is the company we had in the past, which we appropriated about, I'm going to say $120,000 per year on. And that has been eliminated and has been replaced by annual software maintenance charges for the payroll system. We had to backfill on things that were part of the Harper system. For instance, we have now have to pay for the stock for our checks and our W-2 forms and things of that nature. So it wasn't a complete dollar-for-dollar savings, but $75,000 of annual savings in this year's budget. So
Going forward.
and going forward, yes.
Good.
Selectman, you had a turn. Let's get, Waschinsky.
Couple of things. Can you tell us about the energy contracts? I guess that's Mr. Giannakis. And this is a good news story, I think.
Yes, David Giannakis, Chief Procurement Officer. Regarding the cooperatives that I manage for 11 local cities and towns, we have done pretty well in the past couple of years, and especially in the current fiscal year for diesel and gasoline. We've been favorably bidding, partly because the timing is really imperative to, I don't want to say time the market, but we truly have to do that. I have to look at on a daily, weekly basis with some 2-3 weeks out due to the bidding process that we undertake. And it's been, I've been pleased, the other communities here, that because of their volume in combination with the volume of Brookline, Newton, Cambridge being the two largest communities, we're able to get a good price for all of us. And it's a cooperative that predates my arrival here in Brookline, but I've made sure that we've kept this going and actually been beneficial to all the communities. And we do it on an annual basis. I'm a little less hopeful that next fiscal year we're going to hit the same numbers, but there are some indications, believe it or not, in the next 2 or 3 months before the end of this fiscal year when we have to bid again, that hopefully we'll be able to get pricing not substantially higher than where we are this year. We're hoping. I can't guarantee it because of all
This
the...
comes up in like the June timeframe.
We've bid as early as February, and some years when I see the pricing has dipped. This year, unfortunately, the big dip came in November, which would have been great, but the companies usually, oil companies won't bid more than 6 months out. So we're sort of in that January to June timeframe, which is we're looking for the sweet spot in that. We've had, if you go back to '08, an unpleasant year where the pricing was very high, but I think we all suffered that year. So we're hoping, looking at, I'm looking at the market, and right now they're higher than I'd like them to be. So we're going to wait and see when the winter season's over. Typically there has been a moderate reduction. So we're hoping that that continues. Again, world events can sometimes play against that.
One other comment, I guess this is for Mr. Cirillo. In the workload indicators, the way you show, you show a percent increase and decrease in investment earnings. So, so you're showing a negative 25% decrease in investment earnings. Well, that's because interest rates have gone down. So I don't know if that's
Again.
really expressing.
Well,
I don't know. You may want to, it may be more effective in this particular thing to just express the interest rate.
yeah, I agree with you. Matter of fact, we as an organization are committed to improving the statistical indicators. And we've added some new statistical indicators in there. But that's one that we should revisit, and I appreciate your comment. If I could just digress for a minute, I want to also mention one other name that I hadn't mentioned for the payroll conversion, and that's your own Melissa Goff, who just did a tremendous job in that whole system, particularly on the position control, but also on the just herding cats that through this whole process. So I wanted to thank Melissa.
Selectman Daley?
Yeah, well, I did want to say the disaster recovery stuff was something that our auditors have been talking to us about for a couple of years, and insisting that we firm up our disaster recovery procedures, and so I think that that's a good thing that we've tackled that. I just wondered, between your estimate for 2013 and your actuals on the purchase order value in millions, there was kind of a dip, and you were estimating 65, you got 57.3, and yet you're estimating 70 for, is that just because we were between school projects? Or?
Yes, and that's exactly what it is. We put everything through the PO system. There was a time, some number of years ago, where POs weren't required for all of the projects. When you see a school project, things jump up because the building department obviously is getting furniture, getting supplies, and the general operations at the school department tend to tick up. And we're expecting, with the enrollment issues and others that are obviously facing all of us, that a number of equipment orders, service orders, all of them are going to increase over the
But
next
this
few
is
years.
not, this is not anybody trying to evade that system.
No, we've got to, in working with the comptroller and all the departments, we're almost down to $0 where people issue purchase orders, which some might argue is, but we literally, for the $1, we'll be able to, we do purchase orders for pretty much everything.
Well, I'm happy to say, from the audit committee point of view, it's something we used to hear about problems with, and we haven't in the last few years, so that's good.
Good. Selectman Goldstein?
Thank you. I want to ask about collections. Can you give us a quick rundown? I'm interested in water bills, refuse bills, excise tax bills. Are we collecting at the same rate? Are we seeing an increase in non-performing accounts and defaulting accounts?
I'm always pleased with the subdivision for collections. We are collecting at the same rate. Rate is high. It's the real estate is about 99.7%. The water and refuse are similar. Excise tax comes in year one at about 92%, and by the time it gets marked at the registry, it's around 98%. I give credit to the staff down in the treasurer's office, but I also like to give credit to the citizens of this community. They are sophisticated. They understand working and dealing in money. And yes, we have properties that don't pay taxes, and you see their names and their properties listed in the newspapers when we have to do an annual tax taking. But envision, if you will, of the 17,500 real estate parcels in this community, and 40 don't pay their taxes. And those 40 ultimately do pay their taxes because property tax and therefore water and refuse are 100% collectible, because the water and refuse get attached to the real estate. And so those ultimately are 100% collectible. Excise tax, not as much, but it's still quite high, extraordinary high compared to other communities. It's a 98 plus. And by the time you conclude that you can't collect the residue of excise tax that is still out there, 6 years old and never been marked at the registry, they've moved out of town. They've moved out of the state, essentially. And so there is some write-off of excise, but not much.
No, so no material change in that?
No.
One other really obscure question. Why would we see a decrease in the number of property tax bills issued? I noticed in the performance indicators.
Well, that number moves constantly, up and down, up and down.
Why would it go down?
Sometimes they take a property that might be multiple families or multiple condos, and they may convert it into one property.
Mhm.
They may take it off the tax rolls. I could give you an example of a property, a $5.5 million property that was just purchased by a nonprofit and was taken off the tax rolls.
70,400 tax bills in 2012 to 68,500 in 2013.
Yeah, that's multiplied by 4, by the way.
Yeah,
It's,
no,
you
I
know,
understand that, but it's
But
a reasonably big jump.
they change. Their estimates, we take a bill count when we're writing the statistical indicators up from the snapshot of the last year, and they do change from year to year. I can't tell you why.
Thanks.
Selectman Benka.
Yeah. Without identifying any names, are there any pilot agreements that are in the works at this point? And part 2 of the question, is there any assistance that the board could give with respect to pilot agreements?
Without mentioning names, we are in discussions with 2 nonprofits, 2 secondary schools. One is progressing. The other is, we've had preliminary discussions, and those discussions seem to be lagging. Frankly, your support in the past has been essential in getting the 15 pilots we've gotten. The policy that was adopted by the Selectmen and amended by the Selectmen really helps us in achieving and acquiring more pilots. The more pilots we get, the easier it is to get the next pilot. The problems we've been having are getting into the secondary school market. They seem to be having discussions amongst themselves about holding the firewall against this. But I believe that there should be at least one secondary school coming for you in the next few months.
We should say for anyone watching that pilots are payments in lieu of taxes.
Payments in lieu of taxes,
For
absolutely.
nonprofit institutions.
Right, or exempt organizations. Do you have any other? I have just a sort of a general question. Our deputy town administrator is showing us numbers about how many more electronic payments we're getting.
Yeah.
And so my question is, how are we doing with processing? Is that working well? Because it appears that this is a trend that is going to grow.
Yeah. First of all, I will, just to give a brief, I was the doubting Tom on this one. I didn't envision it taking off as well as it has. I have been convinced by the deputy administrator, and the evidence shows that the citizens of this community want to have these transactions via credit cards or by e-payments,
Right.
debit payments. We're right around the 18% mark in water and refuse. I can't tell you what it is in excise. I honestly don't know. At real estate, we've gone from a 0.25% to about 3.5%, which is huge.
Wow.
And so the volume is up. The system and the service we use, we went out and bid for. From time to time, there's problems because that computer company, it's called Invoice Cloud, interfaces with some of our outsourced accounts receivable companies like Kelly and Ryan for excise and MMA for real estate and water and refuse. And from time to time, there's a lag between uploading the filing and having it available for citizens. And the citizens are sophisticated, and they want to get right to this, and they're looking for the bills, and it isn't there on a timely basis a day later or something like that. So that's been some problems. We were trying to address that with the company. From the implementation point of view, or from the back-end point of view, it's difficult. I have to be honest with you. It's, when we started this process, I had hair, and then now it's falling out. And that is from reconciling the bank accounts that all of this flow of activity is coming into. It's a very difficult process, which is completely different from the old days where everybody used to pay by lockbox, which was gone right to the bank and scanned in by the bank and downloaded to our database. So it was somewhat instantaneous. This is more convenient for the citizens, a little more difficult for the working staff.
Does it mean that, I mean, given the percentages that you were just quoting, but I'm curious, does this mean that we're getting our payments earlier, sooner, for example?
Yeah, in
than,
some
you know,
cases,
there
yeah.
probably used to be more of a time lag, right?
And well, if I could say, in the old days, and I
Yeah,
hate using
right,
that expression,
right.
but it really points to where I am in my career. We would get roughly 55% of our payments through lockbox. We would get about 30% through mortgage payments. And the rest would come in over the counter in the mail. Now it's changed a bit. The lockbox has come down, the credit cards have gone up, but we still get, 30%-ish of our payments from mortgage payments. I mean, the last day of the due period, we always
Sure,
get
right.
$11 million coming in from banks, wired in from banks. $11 million of the 45 comes in just like that. That represents basically the 30%. So.
Okay, well, but it does seem to be that it is growing, this electronic.
The volume
payment.
is
Yeah,
growing.
well, definitely.
And there's another thing. One would think that in real estate that people would be utilizing the debit payments because it's 40 cents versus
Yeah,
2.5%. I'm seeing evidence now that that is not a concern to the citizens. They've gone from debit to, oh, well, what the heck, it's miles, slapping it on their American Express or
Got it.
their Visa card, and I
so
have
the
seen.
incentive
I
is.
didn't even know there was a difference. Now I'm glad you told me.
Yeah.
No, and it's true, I think, only for property tax, right?
Yes.
That there's an additional charge if you use a credit card.
Well,
Or,
no, the charges are the charges. The water and refuse are slightly less than the real estate and excise. However, the difference is that we pick up the tab for the others. We do not pick up the tab for real estate.
Right.
We do,
So-
in fact, the citizens do pick up the tab for water. We just build it into their rates.
Right.
They're not seeing it in the transaction. But
But
on real estate, it's there.
If I pay my real estate taxes with a credit card, it costs me how much, what percent?
Point
Depends on your credit card, I think.
2.4, something like that.
I'm sorry?
2.4%, something like that.
2.4%.
Something in that range.
Plus what your credit card charges you.
Yeah.
Right, because
Yeah.
your credit card
Did you say
vendor will
0.2
charge
or
you
No,
too.
2.4%.
You
Well-
don't pay the balance.
Of the
Yeah,
total?
right.
Oh, that's kind of significant.
Yeah,
It is.
that's why we did not expect people to be using cards for real estate. We expected debits, but that doesn't appear to.
Well, it depends
I
on
don't-
what kind of rewards
I think-
program you've
Well, I
got.
also think maybe you need to make that clearer.
We make it clear. It's all over the
Yeah.
website, and every conversation on the telephone starts with that. Now, you could do it this for this price, or you can do this for this price.
Interesting, very
But we were
interesting.
just discussing you get miles
Yeah,
that might be worth 1 or 1.5%.
right,
So-
right,
Now,
right.
the other
But-
alternative electronically is the electronic check, where you
Yeah.
put in your bank routing number, and that's at 40 cents. So it's
Yeah,
less,
right.
less than a stamp.
Absolutely. Cheaper than a stamp. That is amazing. Oh, dear.
I just
So
want to
the
deliver.
post office was going out of business, sorry.
deliver a public message to our assessor, Mr. McCabe. The selectmen got in their packages this week a letter from the town of Dartmouth, Massachusetts, who are engaged in bringing legislation to affect changes to the small business tax exemption. So I want to let you know that I took them up on it. I've called their town administrator, and I might be calling on you shortly. Maybe we'll be paying a visit down there shortly, Gary.
Thank you, Selectman Goldstein. I'll follow up on that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any further questions from members of the board?
No, but I
Go
should
ahead.
say, while we're talking to Mr. McCabe, that I just got a compliment about you from one of our sort of taxpayer who, I will say that I gasped a little bit when he told me how high his taxes are in his large house. But he actually paid you a compliment and said you were very good at your job.
Thank you, Selectman Daley. It's nice to hear once in a while.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cirillo and colleagues, and I think from my perspective at least, I'm very pleased to see that the munis conversions seem to be working effectively. I'm pleased that we're increasing the, let's say, the options that people have for making their payments, and absolutely delighted at our rate of collection, so doing good work. Thank you very much. Okay, the next one is recreation. So you revolve, I gather.
Thank you. Good segue to Recreation Department. Is made up of 3 separate funds. The first is the Golf or Enterprise Fund, the second is the General or Taxpayer Fund, and the third is the Revolving Fund. So I'll be going over just the net gains and losses in those funds, and then I'll talk a little bit about accomplishments. I wanted to start off with the Golf or Enterprise Fund. We are projecting 1.331923. It's an overall 10.1 increase, or $122,000, and we're projecting a modest increase in new golf revenue. It would be made up of cart rentals and pro shop, or what we like to call non-traditional golf revenue.
Non-traditional?
Yes,
Okay.
non-traditional or non-greens fee golf
Okay.
revenue. Secondly, the general fund is projected at $1,006,120. It's a net $44,000 decrease, which is from the elimination of the facilities assistant and a transfer of the Sewell Early Childhood Center director to revolving. Services decreased by about $18,000. And there was an increase in supplies of about $20,000 for maintenance of buildings, and that would include all of the buildings in the recreation department. The third fund is the revolving fund, which comes in at $2,742,350. It's a modest increase of 4.4% or $114,000. Personnel increases of about 8.8%. We have some increases in fees for lacrosse and some other league fees. We had a benefits increase of about, we have a financial aid increase to about $82,000 this year as well. I wanted to also remind you too that the recreation department functions on a cost center basis. So we have 10 cost centers, each within its own category and its own cost recovery. Within each center, each program or service is evaluated under our cost recovery method. Once a fee is established through the cost recovery, we also use a series of filters to determine the market rate comparison and decide on an action plan to move forward. So we look at things like alignment with mission, financial viability, market position, and it results in a recommended strategy to either invest in a program or service, collaborate, divest, or provide subsidy. And that's, in a nutshell, what our financial strategy is for all of our recreation programs and services. I passed out to you some performance indicators. We then follow up and close the circle, if you will, by using our performance indicators to determine our success. And this year, I wanted to point out, we did use some of these in the budget book, but this is sort of a snapshot of a few things from each one of our divisions. And what we do in terms of looking at our goals and initiatives inside the department, and then we come back and really measure the indicators and decide how we're going to, if we're improving and what we're going to do about that if we're not. This is modeled actually after what I think is actually a very good model, and that's the Commonwealth's model right now. And you can see a couple of the things I wanted to point out. One is in the aquatics division, our strategic goal, for instance, was to increase the number of swipe card holders that we have who utilize the pool. Helps us with ease of access. It's a great thing. It's a great tool for people. They can keep it in on their keychain. It's a key fob. We've increased that percentage of passes from FY13, you can see 18%. FY14, we're projected at 10%. We'd like to get up to 10% increase in 15 as well. So those are the kinds of things that we measure within the rec department. I also wanted to point out another one that I'm.
Lisa, just clarify,
Yep.
these are percent increases from the prior year performance?
Yes, thanks.
Year over year, right?
Yes, year over year. Rec therapy, for instance, one of the things that we found very important was our rec therapy participants. We want them to be able to, one of the goals for them is to be able to use public transportation independently. And one of the measures that we can look at is the percent of our forever young participants who arrive by public transportation. And we started off with 87% in FY13. We're at about 80% this year, and we expect 90% next year. And I want to point out, too, the reason why we do performance measurement like this and the indicators is because in recreation, I think a lot of times it's not just about the numbers, and this was a method for my department to really apply some reason and some priority and some meat behind what we measure. Why do we measure it? Why is it important? And why is it important to the community? And should we be continuing doing something and offering something, and why? So I think these things are really important. One other thing I wanted to point out was golf, our increase in non-golf revenue. And that's measured in this instance by merchandise revenue per round. And so you can see we've gone up steadily, and we're looking at, in our FY15 target, at about $3.25 increase, that is. Another one.
This is going to be a dumb question.
Yeah.
Golf balls?
Yeah. You mean
Okay.
the sale of golf balls?
Yeah, right.
Yes. Yes.
Just curious.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, no, that actually, the pro shop revenue over the last 2 fiscal years has increased dramatically, and it's because of the kind of merchandise we're selling there, the brand, and our marketing plan there. So
Okay,
I have to
good.
credit our golf pro for that.
Good.
One of the things Steve talked about just earlier was decreasing. I don't know if he actually talked about this, but one of our goals is to decrease cash flow. And that measurement is the percentage of transactions by credit card. Now, we've always had a significantly high credit card transaction rate within recreation anyway, just simply because of the number of transactions we do. But we're projecting a little bit higher each year. I wanted to actually also highlight a few of the other accomplishments over the past year and bring your attention to our second year of Brookline Day this year. We had, I know you were all there, so thank you very much again for coming. As you remember, the skies cleared at just the right time, so it was a great day. We had about 8,000 people there, and we expanded this year's Brookline Day to include the road race in the morning, which was very successful. We have the date for next year, which is going to be September 14th. It's a week earlier than it has been in the past. It's usually the 3rd week. But Labor Day is actually early this year, so it sort of falls in the same week in the calendar. I also wanted to let you know that we are doing really well with the concussion policy that we've established here in Brookline. this year, September 1st was our first attempt at actually mandating Center for Disease Control training and certification for all of the participants, the volunteers and coaches, in order for them to get a permit to utilize the fields and facilities. We're at a very, very high 90+% compliance rate, which is really quite awesome. And again, I wanted to say to you too that we're really proud of this policy. It is going to be at some point used as a template for other communities in Mass and perhaps the expansion of the state law. I also wanted to let you know that Brookline Recreation is hosting a day-long, it's called the New England Youth Sports Concussion Forum. It's going to be held at Gillette Stadium. It's on May 8th. And the Kraft family has been fabulous about letting us get the venue at a very deeply discounted price. But we have world-renowned speakers and a bunch of breakout sessions to really talk about policy, talk about the challenges of the Mass General laws, but to also educate and advocate for concussion awareness. I also wanted to point out to you, too, that the RAFT program broke 1,000 participants, again, for the second year this year, which the 1,000-plus participants represented 73% of the 6th to 8th graders in the Brookline Public Schools. And we have incredibly successful dodgeball program on Friday nights. So those kinds of things are really still happening. Even though the Teen Center is a really good alternative for kids, those kinds of things are still happening, and they're really still very popular with kids in the 6th through 8th grade. So we're really happy and very proud to still be offering that stuff. Rec therapy, which is something a couple of years ago the Selectmen and the advisory supported wholeheartedly, and I want you to know that it's been just an incredible success and a great addition to this community. We have now, in Special Olympics, we represent 6 sports, over 50 volunteers and over 200 athletes. We offer an incredible amount of camp support to those students who are taking our camp summer services from their extended school year option that they can do with the Brookline Public Schools. And we also partner extensively with Brookline Mental Health, too. So just to wrap it up, you know, I guess in this whole climate of override studies and subcommittees, and certainly have been to my share, many of those subcommittee meetings, and I find that to be just an amazing process. And I am really honored to be part of that process. I think Brookline has done it really well. Previously, I had been through 5 override studies that were never done anywhere near like this. So I think it's just an amazing town to work in. And also, I just wanted to say what a joy it's been to work in a town that values recreation as much as Brookline does. You know, you allow for subsidies so that any resident can reap the benefit of of public recreation. And I want you to know that we take responsibility, that the taxpayers have allowed us, to work hard and be both transparent and responsive to the needs of the community. Over the past several years, 3 important business strategies have helped to shape our business model. And 1 was the needs assessment and valuation of user groups. 2 was the cost recovery and responsible financial strategies. And 3 was by monitoring our effectiveness through performance management. Brookline Rec has functioned with the ultimate goal of transparency and partnered in philosophy with the taxpayers to provide programs and services that are necessary for many families. Knowing the true cost of doing business and validating tax subsidy from the town through cost recovery has enabled us to grow our programs and services in the areas that are most valued by Brookline. We use our performance indicators to record achievements and shape management decisions and create a dynamic community presence that thrives in all economies. In closing, this year, our summer camp served over 1,200 families. We helped to feed over 1,500 meals to campers. Our Special Olympics teams, as I said, are 50-plus volunteers strong, and 50-plus and 200-plus participants strong. We taught several hundred children how to swim and enabled 300-plus seniors to travel outside their homes on trips. We take our motto, "No child left inside," seriously, and with our programs are able to reach into people's homes, turn off the TV or the iPad or the iPhone, and allow kids and adults, hopefully, the opportunity for healthy, fulfilling, and community-centered life.
Wow. I have a kind of informational question. You've got volunteers down here actually with a cost equivalent, which is impressive. I'm just curious to know, certainly you've explained about rec therapy, but in general, what are these volunteers doing? Where are they?
They're actually working with they're coaching Special Olympics teams, or they're volunteering at the Forever Young program that I pointed out. Forever Young is a program that we run on Friday nights, every other Friday night, and we take groups of special needs people to different places to do life skills work and socialize and do things like that. So we have a fairly low client to staff ratio in that, so
Okay.
a lot of times.
And in general, the general category of volunteers, those are the coaches and other, when do you say, there's 600 some odd?
Oh, yeah, oh, those would be all coaches.
Coaches
and, yes.
mostly.
Mostly coaches, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry
All
if
right.
I misunderstood
No,
your
no, no,
question.
no. I was curious
Yeah.
to know where those volunteers
Yeah.
fit into the recreational
Yep.
therapy, because I imagine you need to give them some training. That's not,
Yes. Actually, Special Olympics does a really good job of
Uh-huh.
training, and then we train otherwise as well.
otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have a bunch of interns
Yeah.
that work with
Oh,
us and
that's
college
great to know.
students. Yeah.
All right. Selectman Daley.
Yeah, one point, and I know you just mentioned the seniors going on trips, and you and I spoke when we were doing the age-friendly city report about number of offerings you have, and next time I see your strategic goals, I would like
Yep.
to see something about something for seniors and trying to increase that. 'cause,
Yes, I will put that in there.
I just wanted to ask too about the facilities assistant, the elimination of that position. What did that person do, and who is going to be doing it? in
Right,
that
so
place?
we've moved that to part-time work. That was, I don't know if you remember, a few weeks ago, I was here to fill the custodian position. This has been a little bit of because Marvin Oliveras, who was our facilities assistant, then applied and got the job of custodian, a new position that we had in the revolving fund, and then applied and got a position with the police department just recently.
Oh.
So so we're kind of shuffling things around, but we've kind of been able to move a lot of that stuff to some part-time help, and hopefully we'll keep it that way.
Yeah, I had one final question, and this is in the Gulf Enterprise Fund, and it was at the top of that chart about the number of rounds.
Yeah.
The numbers don't add up. And so it looks like you've had a huge decrease in like rounds by residents. But since, I'm assuming maybe that's not really the case, because you've only had a slight decrease in total rounds. Because I'm a little concerned if residents aren't using our golf course.
Oh, that's only because, how this is reported and how we actually, at our point of sale, consider, we don't actually have a non-resident and resident rate. The times that are the non-resident rates are we record as our rack rate, our highest rate. So this is actually, the total rounds are correct,
Yeah.
but we don't actually have a very accurate, other than by zip code, and we don't always get the zip codes of some of our point of sale, like people off the street who come in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just suggesting to you, you might, these numbers don't add up, so you might,
Yeah.
for
What
this year, so you might want to use different format next year.
For fiscal
Yeah,
14,
no.
they've done it as not available.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
is really what you're suggesting.
Yes, I guess so, yeah.
Okay. Yes, Selectman Waschinsky.
How Hi, there's a measure in aquatics that I like, and it's the percentage of increase in swim lessons. And I don't see a similar kind of metric with golf, for example, because the lessons have been kind of flat, and maybe that's because of the capacity. But I see lessons as opening your market, trying to get people in the door. Take myself around this time every year, I start thinking, yeah, maybe I'll take up golf. And one year I actually looked into it a little bit, and it didn't seem very accessible on the website to how to sign up and what you needed to do and who you needed to call. So you may want to think about, one, making it more accessible and apparent, and market lessons, because a lot of benefits to that. And two, I would encourage that kind of metric in here.
I appreciate that. And actually, to answer the first question or comment, is to let you know that we actually are completely changing our website, even though we just actually did that a couple of years ago. But I think you'd find that much more accessible. And I wonder when the last time you were there, because I do.
A few years ago.
Okay, all right. I hope you go back, because it's a very different place in the last 3 years, I would say. Secondly, this is a snapshot of all of our performance measurements. I felt like I would overwhelm you with all of the ones that we keep in detail in each one of the divisions. So I think that's something I could definitely include next year, if not get to you.
Yes, Selectman Goldstein.
By the way, Selectman Bank will give you a lesson sometime. There's no doubt about it.
And you get what you pay for.
A couple things. By the way, great job giving an overview of the whole department and the programs. Which leads me to sort of ask the negative. So,
I'm not doing this again next year, then.
Are there any programs that you think are not achieving the target participation? And have there any programs which you've dropped for this year?
We have actually dropped some of our day trip programs just because of a cost reason. We dropped an archery program because of that this year, one of them. But in answer to that question, for each one of the 400-plus programs that we run every year, each one of them goes through that analysis that I outlined, and we make a decision. It's not always based on the cost or what we're recovering, and if it falls within the cost recovery, that's the first line. And then the second line is really, we look at the market value, we look to see if we have any, what our market competition is, and whether or not we can partner with somebody, and then we make a decision to keep investing or divest of it, and we certainly do divest.
Okay.
That's been a very.
I want to know that you're applying that critical eye to these programs.
Yes.
And that
Oh,
they're
yes,
not
absolutely.
automatically getting renewed year to year.
No, absolutely. And that's all the other part of cost recovery and that financial strategy is to really keep an eye to the bottom line with a balance in philosophy and subsidy.
Okay. Did you look into doing a color run for Brookline Day next September?
We did. It's very expensive to
Oh,
get
it
into
is,
to
huh?
get the franchise, or to get the label, if you will.
Not going to happen, huh?
I don't believe it's going to happen for Brookline Day this year.
Thank
What
you.
is this?
Color run is when you have a running event, you supplement it with these packages of colored cornstarch that gets thrown about, and I think sometimes they actually shoot it through these fan machines and stuff, and it's quite a spectacle. All the runners dress in white. They come out with festooned with colors. It's really festive. I've seen pictures of the thing. People love it. I just suggested it to Lisa as something to look into for the future.
Yeah.
But if it's too much money, forget it.
It's funny because it is a patented or a copyrighted name, if you will.
Yeah.
We could set something up.
Yeah, I'm sure we could have it named something. Yeah,
Coloring.
Right.
Cornstarch. Make a mess of things.
Right. Other questions? I have just a sort of, out of curiosity, I know that you have a number of partnerships, and therefore, I'm just sort of wondering, I know we do youth baseball, we do youth soccer. Are there golf groups, or, I mean, are there other categoric organized groups like that?
Yes, not golf. Golf tends to be
Well, I
more,
didn't-
yeah.
Didn't guess there was.
Yeah. But although the high school has a very healthy golf team, both boys and
yeah.
girls. I mean, the normals, lacrosse, basketball is a very, very large program now. The Joel No program had 37 teams. The travel program had 18 teams this year.
Oh, wow.
I mean, they've grown leaps and bounds. We have a huge high school in-town high school league, which I think is really important. This is a little bit of a side topic, but just to let you know that we're sort of bridging the gap of those kids who don't make the high school teams, try out and don't make the teams, because you can only carry
Sure.
10 or 12 kids
Right,
in a team,
right.
but they still want to play in a competitive environment. And so we ran, I believe, 12 high school basketball teams this year in a league, which was awesome. Although, we had 75 kids who were able to play basketball right through a season who wouldn't have had that otherwise. So that's an example. And then, of course, there's youth soccer, and then there's travel soccer. We have a great partnership with travel soccer. Pop Warner is still alive and kicking. And, Yep. And lacrosse is growing every year. And we do have a really good relationship with youth baseball.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Just good to hear that all of that is up and running and presumably a continuing source of volunteers. Okay.
I just want to say I'm very impressed that you're continuing work on the concussions. I think that's a
Thank you.
really important issue, and thank
Absolutely.
you for that.
Right.
Thanks.
Okay, I thank you very much, and we will stay tuned.
Thanks.
Okay, quickly, we're going to do unclassified.
Good evening. So the unclassified part of the budget is some miscellaneous accounts that don't really have a home in any particular department, but I'll run through the changes very quickly. We have our out-of-state travel, which is level funded at $3,000. We have the printing of warrants, reports, things like your budget book, which is also level funded at $25,000. Slight increase in MMA dues. General insurance is up 10.9%, about $36,000. The audit and professional services account is level funded. The contingency fund, which is for miscellaneous items that come up during the year, is also level funded at $15,000. The liability catastrophe fund is up $80,724. It's 1% of prior year net revenue. The affordable housing trust fund is a 69% decrease, about $384,000. That is based on the flow of free cash according to the town's financial policies. The stabilization fund, we're not recommending additional appropriation at this time, so it's a $250,000 decrease. And the reserve fund is a decrease of $39,463, which is also 1% of prior year net revenue, 75% of which is from the property tax and 25% from free cash.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Goff with regard to these miscellaneous items?
A number of these are driven by the fiscal policies
Right,
that are in
right,
place.
right,
So
and they're
these really-
calculated, exactly. All right, there are no questions, thank you very much. And we will move on to the Brookline Place proposal. Oh. Good.
Restful language.
Yeah, well, not only that, but got what I asked for, as
So,
anticipated.
They're
I just
apparently,
didn't think it was going to be quite that many words.
apparently they're not allowing Ms. Gilbert to use our town computers anymore.
Took a password away.
Okay, we're going to get visuals. Well, it's more fun in the dark. But we aren't even dimmed at all now, right?
It's actually bright enough.
Okay, all right. I love the fact that every time we turn this on, it asks us to please clean the filter. I wasn't aware there was one.
I think they mean buy a new one.
Okay, well, just sort of to put this in sort of a framework, we are going to discuss this evening information and recommendations that were made by the Brookline Place Advisory Committee with regard to the development at with Children's Hospital at Brookline Place, which will involve a series of documents that must be approved, as well as zoning changes that will be discussed at town meeting.
Maybe I'll take this opportunity to...
Absolutely. Why don't you two do this?
On behalf
I
of
don't have to
Selectman
fill in.
Waschinsky and myself, to thank the Brookline Place Advisory Committee,
Absolutely.
who did absolute yeoman's work here for many months and many meetings, and I have not counted them all. But it was truly a team of experts, myself excluded. Every member of that committee had their specialty, had their unique perspective, had their expertise, and brought it to bear on a very, very complex problem, as you already know, and most people who've been exposed to this know. There's a lot of moving parts here. We have a nonprofit developer. We have some contaminated conditions on the site. We have a project that everybody thought was done 3 years ago that's required a very careful reevaluation, both in terms of its financial details and in terms of its bricks and mortar details and on the ground. I feel that what this process has come up with is actually a better process, a better project than we had 3 years ago, but maintaining the same economic benefits or better economic benefits than we would have experienced 3 years ago. So I'm quite proud of it, and I know Selectman Waschinsky is too. And I want to put out publicly my thanks to the members of that committee and to our developer, who really worked with us not as an adversary but as a teammate.
Yeah, and I'll second that, and there were a lot of competing interests and a real balance that we were trying to achieve, and I hope that we've achieved it. I think we have some good, solid zoning proposal that'll be going to town meeting, and I hope town meeting will favorably consider it, because I think it's a good proposal.
Well, I can only say that it is with great pleasure that there's actually now looking like we've got a project that can go forward. Selectman Daley?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize sort of what Chairman DeWitt said, that what we are being asked to do tonight is to simply put this on the warrant. We're not being asked as a board yet to take a decision on this. I know there'll be vigorous debate as we go along through our usual process, but this is simply a discussion about putting this on the warrant so it can
Right. And not
get
only
into
that,
that process.
the three warrants that we're being asked to act on are not even the zoning warrants. Those have been put forward by the Brookline Place Advisory Committee. They've signed the warrant for the zoning, and these are three somewhat ancillary issues to the main. They're necessary, but ancillary.
Yeah, I would say absolutely necessary, but different from zoning. How's that? I think it's a package, and to the extent that we know that in the beginning, we were entering into a very complicated set of agreements with the developer, Children's Hospital. I would say that it is very important to know that the revised proposal has had very strong support from the committee that was reviewing the changes, and I'm hoping that this will all go before town meeting with an equally strong endorsement. But anyway,
Just to
Yep.
follow up on that, my understanding is that the Brookline Place Advisory Committee approved the zoning article this morning
Yep.
without any negative votes.
Right.
And the same was true of the zoning bylaw committee, which I chair, which looked at it last night and recommended some tweaks to it, which were adopted.
Yes.
Were adopted this morning, and the zoning bylaw committee recommended the article again with no negative votes. So
Good.
there's, I think, a good deal of consensus behind the articles, and frankly, I would just comment that the tone of our discussions at the zoning bylaw committee with the developer and the developer's representatives from the Children's Hospital entities, the members of the committee raised questions, and there was a 15-second conference, and they said, yes, we can include language that'll deal with that. Or in a situation where there was an issue, they were frank about that. And this was not, from our perspective, in just a couple of meetings, this was not a situation where a developer was trying to hide the ball. I think there was a good deal of openness during this process, and I think it was looking at it from where I saw it, it was an extraordinarily healthy process.
Yeah, I think we had the same experience on the Brookline Place Advisory Committee.
okay.
So-
Ms. Burton?
Yes, thank you. The computer's not working, but that's okay. There was only
All
two
right.
images which you have in your packet, so we'll just walk through this together. In addition to the comments that have been made already, I just wanted to go through some of the recommendations that the committee has been talking about and will be in their final report to the Board of Selectmen. We are waiting for the actual written report, final report from both our financial consultant as well as our parking consultant, but the recommendations have been given to the committee verbally over the months and worked into the committee's recommendations. The committee was able to make a couple findings. They looked at the site's relationship to the surrounding area, including the Gateway East plans, surrounding building heights, looked at some of the soil conditions, looked at the old 2009 proposed plan, existing zoning, and then did speak with the town's parking and traffic consultants, as well as Pam McKinney, our financial analyst. Recommendations that they made generally, so outside of zoning, but just recommendations they had as an outcome of the committee, fall into a couple categories. The one that was most often talked about was pedestrian access, and you'll see that in the diagram you have in your packets. You see that 45-foot wide area going across the GMR district. This was the theme that was discussed early on in the committee meetings and carried through today, that having that main access way diagonally through the GMR district from the Brookline Village T Station to the corner of Brookline Ave and Route 9 was an important priority. You know, let's carve out the public space and then figure out where the buildings should be. Secondly, the pedestrian access across Pearl Street, actually connecting the site to the T Station. The committee wants to make sure, as the Board of Appeals and Planning Board Design Advisory Team takes that up, that they pay real attention to making sure that there's visual cues and significant design that prioritizes pedestrian crossing rather than cars traveling around the corner of Pearl Street. With regards to open space, we've talked about that here at the Selectmen a couple meetings, so I'll go through that briefly. But there was a preference for an uninterrupted visual line through the site. This was a comment that Ken Goldstein made early on, from Route 9 all the way through to the T Station. So if it wiggles too much, it's nice. There might be some obstructed views. And then generally, the committee wanted to make sure that any requirements like floor area ratio, parking, open space was for the whole entire district, not just for one development lot like the existing zoning has. And then we get to parking, and that was probably 50% of the conversations, or at least the debates in the committee's work. In the end, with the zoning bylaw committee recommendation and feedback we got from the selectmen last week about being more concerned about the bulk than the specific number of cars, all of that wrapped together, the committee still felt like it was very important to have a maximum, although they did agree, at one point, the maximum was going to be done with ratios based on use, and they agreed with the zoning bylaw committee that this morning that going to just a maximum number of 683 spaces was the right way to go. In addition to the 683 spaces that will most likely be within that garage, there is agreement from the committee and from the zoning bylaw committee that there be an additional opportunity to provide 20% overflow if it's needed, and that would be through valet or tandem parking, but not striped spaces. So to your comment last week, where the committee has worked on controlling the bulk and then allowing some operational flexibility within that bulk. The building mass and placement is much like you've seen it over the last couple of weeks. The major thing that has changed as we've gone throughout these discussions is the parking garage height has gone from 8 stories to 7 stories. Now it's 6.5 stories. And you'll see in the zoning that you have that will be filed on Thursday, there's specific language about the height of a structure. Right now it's the garage. Closest to Village Way, the committee wanted that to be lower than the rest of the district. Only 65 foot tall, and then even stepping down another 10 feet when it's right next to Village Way. And finally, the committee did talk about mitigation of the adverse impacts directly related to the project. So in conversations with our Director of Transportation, and in addition to the special conditions that were agreed to the last time around, there's additional improvements on Pearl Street, as well as funding for Gateway East that's more specific timing-wise, as well as a higher number. So those are kind of the general recommendations. You have the zoning in front of you. I think from here I'll just take questions.
Okay. Before you do that, do the co-chairs have anything you want to add to this summary?
I think I added it in the beginning.
Okay, all right, fine. Then from members of the board, are there any questions about the proposal that's before us? I'm going to summarize very briefly. We are being asked to submit 3 articles for the warrant for the annual town meeting with regard to this. These are articles with protective language, or 2 of them are, and one of them actually is to release the old agreements that had been held in escrow. These are not the zoning article, I guess is really the distinction I'm trying to make here. That will be filed separately by the planning department, but on behalf of the Brookline Place Committee, I guess. Is that right?
And unlike what our agenda says, we're not voting on the memorandum of agreement.
No, we're not voting a memorandum of agreement, right?
Correct.
Okay. So, would you like to add to this, Ms. Gilbert?
Sure, just briefly. So as you've stated, these are 3 warrant articles, not including the zoning warrant article, and they are basically as follows. One would be a warrant article to town meeting, which would authorize the selectmen to accept on behalf of the town a pedestrian easement with open space through the site. And the second one is another article authorizing the selectmen to accept a restrictive covenant, which will also be recorded and run with the land, and that is to protect the tax certainty with respect to the new development. And then finally, the third warrant article would authorize the selectmen to release the prior documents that are still being held in escrow under the 2007 agreements, and then enter into any other further agreements, including the memorandum of agreement upon terms and conditions acceptable to the selectmen. Now, related to this, there are 3 key documents which are still under negotiation, but we have a memorandum of agreement, which will outline all of the mitigation benefits as well as the payments to the town. And then you have the actual pedestrian easement itself, and also the restrictive covenant with respect to the tax certainty. So those should be finalized and executed prior to town meeting, and then they can be incorporated into the votes under these warrant articles.
Okay, Selectman Benka.
So I just want to clarify, you are not asking us to approve or authorize a memorandum of agreement tonight?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. So item number 12 on the agenda, we're not going to worry about right now.
Correct.
Then the item number 3, as written, or vote number 3, to carry out the terms of a memorandum of agreement.
Right.
Can we add something like with respect to the new, to such development?
Yes,
Just,
absolutely.
Just because it kind of hangs out there as written.
Sure.
So with respect to such development. Or such proposed development to distinguish the new one from the old.
Got it.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Questions for Ms. Gilbert?
No, but I
Well-
will comment that the team of Gilbert and Bruton, this project would not be happening and had not arrived at this stage if it wasn't for them, so.
Yes.
They're not done yet, I don't mean to
No.
imply.
No,
Thank you. Thank you
and,
very
and I think it's even fair to comment that they were actively engaged up until like 4 o'clock this afternoon with improved and revised language, so
Yes.
we know that they have worked diligently up to the very last minute. Okay, so are we ready to take these votes?
I'm just
then?
wondering,
Yeah.
any comments from us? George, I saw you writing. Do you want to add anything, or?
I would, actually.
Well, then,
All
please
right.
come forward.
I'm George Cole, representing Children's Hospital, and really, my comments are really an expression of gratitude, because we and Children's Hospital and all the consultants we've worked with feel that this has been a very positive, long, positive experience. And we particularly would like to thank the members of the Brookline Place Advisory Committee who spent an enormous amount of time and energy on this project, and specifically Selectmen Wyszynski and Goldstein, because they really guided this sometimes difficult ship upon stormy waters. We also want to thank all the citizens of Brookline who participated in the process, and we encourage their participation going forward. We're sure we're going to see it, but we found, all in all, it was very constructive, and it resulted in a better project. I know my client, Children's Hospital, feels that where we've ended up is a good place. They're very enthusiastic about the development and moving forward. And we look forward to getting into a real project. Lastly, I'd like to thank Kara and Jen. They have done amazing work on this project with good humor, insight. They both know when to twist arms. They both know when to play nice. They have you have between the two of them a huge reservoir of talent and knowledge, and the town should be proud to have people like Kara and Jen working on behalf. They really did an amazing job on behalf of the town and protecting your interests while making a deal work for everyone. So on behalf of Children's, we'd really like to thank you too very much. I think we all share the desire to create a great built environment on the site, and we believe that this process has resulted in a zoning framework and a business arrangement with the town that allows us to do so. So thank you again.
Well, I think, given that I don't believe we have any further questions, we can just take this vote and then let everybody move on to the next iteration, because I know there are going to be more refinements. It only can get better, right? All right. I move that we authorize that the Board of Selectmen authorize the town's Economic Development Director to file on behalf of the Board of Selectmen as petitioners for inclusion in the warrant for the 2014 annual town meeting 3 warrant articles related to the proposed development of the site known as Brookline Place, and subject to any necessary descriptive language provided by special town council and the vote will cover the items as follows. First, there's three warrant articles. I think we can do one vote. Can we do one vote?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, one vote. Three warrant articles. The first article, an article authorizing the selectmen to accept on behalf of the town a pedestrian easement with open space at the site known as Brookline Place. 2, the second article, an article authorizing the selectmen to accept a restrictive covenant to protect the tax certainty for the proposed new development at Brookline Place. And finally, the third article, an article authorizing the selectmen to release the agreements being held in escrow pertaining to the prior 2007 development at Brookline Place, and to enter into any new agreements or amendments thereto to facilitate the new proposed development at Brookline Place, and to carry out the terms of a memorandum of agreement with respect to such proposed development. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Benka?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. All right. That takes us, I hope, another step forward. And with luck, all the little messy details will continue to be ironed out.
Thank you.
And we may see you again. Who knows? And that concludes the Board of Selectmen's meeting for Tuesday, March 11th.
I think we know we're going to see them again.